My name is Rebecca Martinez, and for 7 years, I walked through the same revolving doors of Crawford Industries every single morning at exactly 7:45 a.m. The building stood tall in downtown Chicago, all steel and glass reflecting the early sunrise. I was the executive assistant to Daniel Crawford, the CEO who inherited his father's commercial real estate empire and somehow believed that made him a genius. That particular October morning, the autumn wind cut through my coat as I hurried from the L train station, clutching my coffee like it was liquid courage. The leaves were turning that beautiful burnt orange color that makes Chicago look like a postcard, but I barely noticed anymore. I had an 8 a.m. meeting to prep for, emails to sort through, and Daniel's dry cleaning to pick up during lunch. That was my life, organized, efficient, and apparently invisible. "Rebecca, where's the Henderson file?" Daniel's voice boomed from his corner office before I'd even set my bag down. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city like he owned it. In some ways, I guess he thought he did. His suit probably cost more than my monthly rent. "On your desk, sir. Left corner, exactly where you asked me to place it yesterday," I replied, keeping my voice steady and professional. After 7 years, I'd learned not to show irritation. He turned, barely glancing at the file that was indeed exactly where I'd said. "The coffee's cold." I'd brought it to him 15 minutes ago, but I didn't argue. "I'll get you a fresh cup." As I walked toward the kitchenette, I passed by Marcus, one of the junior executives who'd been hired 6 months ago. He was 26, fresh out of business school, and already making 3 times my salary. We'd had coffee once, and he'd admitted he didn't even understand half the real estate portfolio. But he was a man in a suit, so he got the title and the paycheck. "Morning, Rebecca," Marcus said warmly. Unlike Daniel, he was actually kind. "That presentation you put together for the Mitchell property? Brilliant work. Daniel killed it in the meeting." I smiled tightly. "Thanks, Marcus. That's what I'm here for." But as I walked away, that familiar burn started in my chest. I'd researched that property for weeks, analyzed the market trends, created the financial projections, and written every word of that presentation. Daniel had literally just read my words off the slides, and everyone praised him for his vision. The day crawled forward like every other day. I scheduled meetings, fielded calls, managed Daniel's calendar like a military operation, and listened to him take credit for work that at least half the time originated from my research and analysis. By 3 p.m., I was in the conference room setting up for the quarterly board meeting. That's when I overheard it. The conference room had a small prep area separated by a partial wall, and I was in there organizing materials when Daniel walked in with Thomas Richardson, the company's CFO. They didn't realize I was there. "So what about that Martinez woman?" Thomas asked. "She's been here forever. Any thought to promoting her to a junior analyst position?" I froze, barely breathing. Daniel laughed, actually laughed. "Rebecca? Come on, Tom. She's just a secretary. Sure, she's organized and efficient, but she doesn't have what it takes for the real work. She's good at making coffee and keeping my schedule straight. That's her ceiling. Just a secretary. Her ceiling." I stood there in that prep area, hands trembling, holding a stack of reports that I'd prepared. Reports analyzing 3 different commercial properties, complete with market comparisons, risk assessments, and investment projections. Reports that Daniel would present as his own insights in about 20 minutes. I finished setting up the room mechanically, my mind somewhere else entirely. When Daniel walked to the head of the table and the board members filed in, I slipped out quietly, like I was supposed to, like a good secretary who knew her place. But something had cracked inside me. I went back to my desk and opened my laptop. But instead of working on Daniel's correspondence, I did something I'd been too afraid to do for 7 years. I opened my personal email and pulled up a folder I'd labeled Someday. Inside were dozens of saved articles, online course completion certificates, and notes I'd been accumulating about commercial real estate investment. You see, while Daniel thought I was just scheduling his meetings, I'd been learning. Every property analysis he'd asked me to summarize, I'd read completely. Every market report he'd had me file, I'd studied first. Every investment book that came across his desk for research, I'd read before passing it along. I'd taken online courses in finance, real estate law, and property management using my lunch breaks and late nights. I wasn't just a secretary. I'd given myself the education that Daniel had inherited through his family connections. The difference was, he didn't know what he had in his hands, but I did. I pulled up my bank account, The one I'd been carefully building through 7 years of living in a tiny studio apartment, rarely eating out, and saving every possible dollar. It wasn't much by Daniel Crawford's standards, but it was mine, and I'd earned every cent. Then I did something crazy. I opened a new browser window and started researching something I'd noticed 3 months ago, something that Daniel, in all his inherited wisdom, had completely missed. The next morning, I arrived at Crawford Industries at exactly 7:45 a.m., just like always. The only difference was the manila folder in my bag that contained printouts of property records, market analyses, and financial projections that had nothing to do with Daniel Crawford's business. It had everything to do with mine. The property I'd found was called the Riverside Commons, a small commercial building in a transitioning neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. It wasn't glamorous. The building was old, built in the 1960s, with weathered brick and windows that probably needed replacing. It currently housed a struggling printing company on the first floor and had 2 vacant floors above. Most people would drive right past it. Daniel Crawford certainly had. But I saw something different. The neighborhood was changing. A new L train extension was being completed 6 blocks away. I'd read about it in the city planning documents that no one else seemed to pay attention to. A major grocery chain had just purchased land 3 blocks over for a new store. Young professionals were starting to move into the area because it was one of the last affordable neighborhoods with decent transit access. The Riverside Commons was selling for $1.2 million, a fraction of what similar buildings in already gentrified neighborhoods cost, and the current owner was motivated. According to public records, they'd inherited it from a family estate and just wanted it off their hands. I'd run the numbers at least 50 times. With a 20% down payment, modest renovations focused on the upper floors, and realistic rental projections based on the neighborhood's trajectory, the building could generate positive cash flow within 18 months. In 5 years, if the neighborhood developed as the data suggested, the property value could triple. But I needed $240,000 for the down payment, plus reserves for renovations and operating costs. My savings account had $89,000. 7 years of disciplined saving on a secretary's salary. I was $151,000 short of my dream. That's when I thought of my Uncle Miguel. Uncle Miguel had come to Chicago from Mexico 30 years ago with nothing. He'd worked construction, saved obsessively, and eventually opened a small restaurant in Pilsen. Over the years, he'd bought the building his restaurant occupied, then another building, then another. He wasn't rich by Daniel Crawford's standards, but he was comfortable. And more importantly, he understood investment in a way that someone who'd inherited everything never could. I called him during my lunch break, stepping outside into the crisp November air. The temperature had dropped, and people hurried past bundled in coats, their breath visible in the cold. "Tio, I need to talk to you about something important," I said in Spanish, our family's language. "It's about a business opportunity." 2 days later, on a Sunday afternoon, I sat in Uncle Miguel's warm kitchen that smelled like fresh tortillas and coffee. His wife, my Aunt Carmen, placed a plate of pan dulce in front of me, while Miguel spread out the documents I'd brought: property records, market analysis, renovation estimates, and financial projections. He studied them for a long time, occasionally asking questions in Spanish. He wanted to know about the neighborhood, the transit development, the comparable properties. He asked about my experience, my knowledge of real estate, and my backup plan if things went wrong. "You learned all this working for that Crawford man?" he asked, tapping my market analysis. "He doesn't know what he has," I said quietly. "He thinks I just make coffee and schedule meetings. But I've been learning, Tio, for years." Miguel looked at Aunt Carmen, who nodded slightly. Then he looked back at me. "I'll lend you $160,000, he said. "But Rebecca, Mija, this isn't a gift. This is a business loan. You'll pay me back with interest, a fair interest, not bank robbery, but interest. And I want to see your business plan updated every quarter. ¿Entiendes?" Tears stung my eyes. "Sí, Tio, I understand. I'll pay you back every cent. And one more thing," he added, his weathered face serious. "You quit that job. That man doesn't deserve you. You're not anyone's secretary anymore. You're a businesswoman." That Monday, I gave my notice. The look on Daniel's face was almost comical. We were in his office, and I'd just handed him a printed letter of resignation. "You're quitting?" He seemed genuinely confused, like the idea that I might have my own life and plans had never occurred to him. "Is this about money? I can probably get you a small raise." It's not about money, Mr. Crawford, I said, standing straighter than I ever had in his office. I'm pursuing another opportunity. Another opportunity? He actually laughed. Rebecca, you've been a secretary for 7 years. What kind of opportunity could... He stopped, maybe finally hearing how condescending he sounded. Look, I appreciate your service, but let's be realistic. Jobs like this don't grow on trees. You might want to reconsider. My decision is final. My 2 weeks' notice begins today. As I walked out of his office, I heard him mutter to himself, good secretaries are impossible to find. Those 2 weeks were the longest and shortest of my life. I walked through the motions at Crawford Industries while simultaneously working with lawyers, inspectors, and contractors about the Riverside Commons. My first day as a property owner, I stood in front of the Riverside Commons in the cold December morning and felt terror and exhilaration in equal measure. The building was mine. This weathered brick, these old windows, these empty floors, mine. And also, terrifyingly, my responsibility. The printing company on the first floor had a lease through the end of the year. The owner, a man named Stan who'd been in business for 30 years, had eyed me suspiciously when we first met. New owner, huh? He'd said, arms crossed. You going to kick us out and turn this into luxury condos? No, I'd replied honestly. I'm going to renovate the upper floors for office space and keep you as a tenant. Your rent is fair, and you've been reliable. Why would I mess with that? His expression had softened slightly. The last owner didn't care about this place. Let everything fall apart. I care, I'd said, and I meant it. The renovation was where my careful planning met messy reality. I'd budgeted for basic updates to the second and third floors, new flooring, fresh paint, modern lighting, updated electrical, and renovated bathrooms. I'd gotten quotes from 3 different contractors and chosen one that came recommended by Uncle Miguel. But buildings, I quickly learned, are full of surprises. The plumbing on the second floor was worse than the inspection had revealed. The heating system needed more extensive work than anticipated. And the windows, those beautiful old windows, they all needed replacing for energy efficiency, which hadn't been in my original budget. I stood in the dusty second floor one January afternoon, watching contractors tear out old carpet and revealing damaged subfloor underneath, and felt panic rise in my throat. How much to fix this? I asked the contractor, a straightforward man named Joe. Another $8,000 probably. I did the math in my head. My contingency fund was already stretched, but I couldn't rent office space with damaged floors. Do it, I said. But Joe, I need you to be honest with me about any other issues before we get deeper into this. He looked at me with something like respect. I appreciate an owner who wants to know the truth. Let me do a thorough walkthrough of both floors and give you a comprehensive list. Better to know now than get surprised later. That night, I sat in my tiny studio apartment, which I couldn't afford to leave yet, and revised my budget for the 3rd time. I'd have to stretch my reserves thinner. Marketing for tenants would have to be done mostly by me instead of hiring a leasing agent. By March, the renovations were finally complete. The 2nd and 3rd floors of Riverside Commons looked transformed. I'd chosen a modern industrial aesthetic that worked with the building's bones. Exposed brick where it was sound, polished concrete floors, new energy-efficient windows, and open floor plans that could be configured for different-sized businesses. Now came the hard part, finding tenants. I created a website, took professional photos, and listed the spaces on every commercial real estate platform I could find. I made flyers and distributed them to local business organizations. Then, in April, I got a call from a woman named Jennifer Park. I saw your listing for the 3rd floor, she said. My company is a tech startup. We do educational software. We're 12 people right now, growing fast, and we can't afford downtown prices. Can I see the space? Jennifer showed up with 2 of her partners, young, energetic people who walked through the renovated floor with obvious excitement. This is perfect, Jennifer said, looking out the new windows at the neighborhood below. It's exactly what we need. Open layout, good light, room to grow. We negotiated a fair lease, not the top of my projected range, but solid and reliable with a 2-year commitment. They moved in May, and suddenly Riverside Commons felt alive. The 2nd floor took longer, but by July, I'd found a small marketing agency looking for affordable space. They took half the floor with an option to expand. I was doing it. The building was 75% occupied, generating steady rental income. I could cover my mortgage, pay back Uncle Miguel, and even start saving again. That's when I saw the email that changed everything. The email came on a Tuesday evening in August. I was at the Riverside Commons, meeting with Stan from the printing company about potentially renewing his lease early when my phone buzzed. The sender was Marcus from Crawford Industries. Rebecca, I don't know if you follow industry news, but Crawford Industries is in trouble. Daniel made some bad investments in suburban retail properties right before several major tenants declared bankruptcy. The company is over-leveraged and looking to sell off assets. I thought you'd want to know. Marcus. I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding. Crawford Industries in trouble? The mighty commercial real estate empire that Daniel had inherited and acted like he'd built with his own genius? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Daniel's words. She's just a secretary. That's her ceiling. By morning, I'd made a decision. I started researching Crawford Industries' situation. Marcus hadn't exaggerated. Daniel had sunk millions into retail properties in dying suburban malls, apparently believing that traditional retail would make a comeback. He'd over-leveraged the company to make these acquisitions, and when 3 major anchor tenants went bankrupt within months of each other, the properties became liabilities instead of assets. Crawford Industries was quietly trying to sell off properties to cover debt, and buried in the list of properties they were selling was one that made me catch my breath. The very building that housed Crawford Industries' offices, the downtown Chicago high-rise that I'd walked into every morning for 7 years. Daniel hadn't just made bad investments. He'd mortgaged everything, including the building his own company operated from, and now he couldn't afford to keep it. The asking price was $8.3 million, far beyond my reach, even with the success of Riverside Commons. But then I thought about Uncle Miguel's network. I thought about Jennifer Park and her tech startup, already talking about expanding. I thought about the marketing agency on my second floor, thriving and looking for additional space. I thought about all the small businesses and independent professionals I'd met in the past year, all looking for opportunities, all underestimated by people like Daniel Crawford. I made some calls, first to Uncle Miguel, who listened to my idea and then called 3 of his business friends, other immigrants who'd built successful small businesses and had capital to invest, but rarely got invited into larger commercial real estate deals. Then to Jennifer Park and 2 other small business owners I'd gotten to know through local business associations, people who understood what I was trying to do because they'd done similar things in their own industries. You want to form an investment group to buy the Crawford building? Jennifer asked when I met her for coffee. That's bold, Rebecca. I can't do it alone, I admitted. But together, with a group of investors who actually understand the value of prime commercial real estate in downtown Chicago, we could make this work. The building is solid, the location is prime. The only reason it's being sold is because Daniel Crawford made bad decisions elsewhere. She smiled slowly. How much of a stake would each investor get? Over the next 6 weeks, I put together something I never imagined I'd be capable of creating. A syndicate of small investors who pooled resources to make a competitive offer on the Crawford Industries building. Uncle Miguel and his network contributed. Jennifer's startup had done well enough to invest. 5 other small business owners came in, and I contributed a portion of the equity I'd built in Riverside Commons. We structured it as an LLC with me as the managing member, the person who would actually oversee the property. Each investor got a proportional stake based on their contribution. Our offer of $7.9 million, slightly below asking but all cash with a quick close, was accepted in September. The day we closed on the Crawford building, I stood in the lobby that I'd walked through thousands of times as an employee, but this time as an owner. Part owner, yes, but an owner nonetheless. The managing member of the LLC that now held the property Daniel Crawford had lost. The final detail that made everything perfect. Crawford Industries' lease was expiring in 6 months. Daniel had been so focused on his failed investments that he'd apparently forgotten to negotiate a renewal. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a number I recognized, Daniel Crawford's direct line. "Rebecca," he said, and I could hear the discomfort in his voice. "I understand you're involved with the new ownership of our building." "I'm the managing member of the investment group that purchased the property, yes," I replied calmly. There was a long pause. "Our lease expires in a few months. We need to discuss renewal terms." "Of course, I'd be happy to discuss a lease renewal with Crawford Industries." I kept my voice professional, businesslike. The market rate for comparable space in this building would be approximately 35% higher than what you're currently paying. Another pause, longer this time. That's significantly higher. It's fair market value, Mr. Crawford. I can send you comparable property analysis if you'd like. I've become quite good at that kind of research. I could almost hear him remembering the reports I'd prepared, the analysis I'd done, all the work he'd dismissed as just secretarial duties. "Rebecca," he said finally, his voice different than I'd ever heard it, humbler. I didn't fully appreciate your capabilities when you worked here." "No," I agreed quietly. "You didn't. If we wanted to negotiate a more favorable rate, would that be possible?" I thought about 7 years of "you're just a secretary." I thought about watching less qualified men get promoted over me. I thought about Daniel laughing about my ceiling, but I also thought about Uncle Miguel teaching me that business wasn't about revenge. It was about building something good. "I tell you what, Mr. Crawford, I'll match your current rate for a 2-year lease with a modest 15% increase below market value on 2 conditions. First, Crawford Industries hires at least 2 women for your next 3 executive-level positions. Real executives, not assistants. Second, you write a recommendation for my business on LinkedIn, acknowledging the analytical work I did during my time at Crawford Industries." "That's fair," he said, sounding surprised. "Very fair, actually. Thank you." After we hung up, I walked to the window of my small office, not in the Crawford building, but at Riverside Commons, where I'd chosen to keep my base. The neighborhood had continued to transform. The new L station had opened. Property values had increased by 40%. My small building was fully occupied with a waiting list of potential tenants. Uncle Miguel's loan was paid off. My investors were happy, and I was building something real, not just for myself, but for other people who'd been underestimated and overlooked. That evening, I met Aunt Carmen and Uncle Miguel for dinner at his restaurant. Over plates of mole and rice, Miguel raised his glass. "To Rebecca," he said in Spanish, "who was never just a secretary, even when someone tried to tell her she was." We clinked glasses, and I looked around the table at my family, the people who'd believed in me when I most needed it. "You know what the best part is?" I said. "I'm not done. Riverside Commons is just the beginning." Uncle Miguel smiled knowingly. "I know, Mija. I can see it in your eyes. You've got that look, the same look I had when I bought my first building. So what's next?" I pulled out my phone and showed them a property listing I'd been researching. Another transitioning neighborhood, another overlooked building with enormous potential. "This one," I said. "And this time, I already have investors asking to be part of the deal." 2 years later, I owned 3 properties in Chicago, managed 2 others for my investment group, and had started mentoring other women trying to break into commercial real estate. Jennifer Park's tech company had grown so much they'd taken over my entire 3rd floor at Riverside Commons and part of the 2nd. Stan's printing company had modernized and signed a long-term lease. And the neighborhood I'd bet on? Property values had tripled, exactly as I'd projected. Last month, at a commercial real estate conference, Daniel and I ended up at the same panel discussion about emerging neighborhood investments. When it was my turn to speak, I talked about looking beyond obvious opportunities, about how the best investments are often the ones that established players overlook. After the panel, Daniel approached me in the hallway. "That was insightful," he said. "You've really built something impressive, Rebecca." "Thank you," I replied simply. "I owe you an apology," he continued. "A real one. I was blind to your abilities, and that was my failure, not yours. You were never just a secretary. You are brilliant at this. I'm sorry I couldn't see it." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw someone who'd learned humility the hard way. Someone who'd lost almost everything because he'd inherited confidence without wisdom. "I appreciate that," I said. "Truly. We all have blind spots. The question is whether we learn from them." As I walked away from that conversation, back toward the conference hall where my latest project presentation was scheduled, I thought about how far I'd come. Not just in terms of buildings owned or money earned, but in terms of knowing, truly knowing, my own worth. I was never just a secretary. I was never just anything. I was Rebecca Martinez, a woman who'd taken knowledge earned in a corner office where she was invisible and built something real, something meaningful, something entirely her own. And my ceiling? It turned out there wasn't one after all.